I know. I'm just gonna hit these live buttons and throw out this docket into chat and say to everyone out there, welcome! Welcome, travelers, to Discussing Tabletop. It is, of course, September 3rd. Damn.
It is indeed September.
If you missed yesterday, I had a 2-hour I just chatted with the world. There was a couple people around, but mostly it was just, if people want to check it out, it was me discussing my ideas and plans for the channel and stuff like that. It's a pretty good idea of what's going on. Like, one of the things I discussed, which I haven't brought up yet, but I want to talk about, is I might be moving the time period for Discussing Tabletop. I had it at, honestly, the time period I had it at 6 years ago.
I will 100% be honest. I would love it if Discussing Tabletop was like a little bit later.
That's what I've been thinking. Like,
it gives me more time to get home from work and actually relax a little bit.
Like an early evening, late afternoon show. Like, just give a couple hours later.
Yeah, it means I can also do a full work day on Saturdays.
It means I can also, like, grab some extra people maybe, too. Like,
not everyone's available at 2 p.m.
It was the schedule I had for the people I had back in the day.
Worked back in the day, and, got to change it up sometimes.
Yesterday, you know what I pulled out of archive? I pulled two things out of archive. I have one of my original stream videos, which I don't have all of them. I'm missing a lot of Discussing Tabletop. They're archived on YouTube. I pulled out one that I actually have a copy of from, like, November of 2016. It is so bad. Oof. The quality is bad because I was streaming me and Joe on Skype on a laptop.
Oh, lovely, dude. That's a blast from the past.
And then I brought up the first video of Discussing Tabletop from my YouTube channel, and it is even jankier, and it was only a month earlier. I improved that month, and it was still really janky.
I remember looking at my first ever stream a billion years ago, and it being, like, actually the worst thing I've ever done.
It was interesting because, like, I also reflected on that I've got my YouTube anniversary coming up in a couple of months, and then, like, honestly, the first episode of Discussing Tabletop, I think, is my Twitch anniversary for my first stream. Because I think that was the first time I live streamed, honestly. Because I couldn't do gaming on a laptop.
No, it's really difficult to do gaming on a laptop.
Yeah. So I think Discussing Tabletop is what started it all back in the day, and I'm like, wow. So that's coming up. And my birthday's coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'm planning some stuff.
Birthday.
I know. I want to do something for my birthday, but I don't know what I want to do yet. Like, it's sort of like, organizing people is not easy. Honestly.
No, organizing adults is difficult. We all have other shit to do.
Well, I got a couple of weeks, so I can start maybe planning ahead of time or something. But excitement in the world coming up. I was originally going to put this Wizard Screws Up first, now that we got it in, but I think when we decided this deeper discussion topics, I'm going to do it last now.
Yeah.
So the docket doesn't quite give everything correctly.
It's not quite lined up, but those are the topics.
Well, normally we start with, like, Wizards anyway and stuff like that, so that's
they're the big one.
I try to go from, like, honestly, to a degree, from, like, big companies to small companies, though. Like,
today's big one is Paizo, and they've released things, apparently.
Well, it's just their monthly releases and talking about some stuff. I like to, hit up on it because, honestly, it's... You don't always notice all the releases for Paizo in a month.
They release a lot of things in a month. Sometimes I don't catch them all.
So it's very nice that they kind of give a month in review a lot of times. So here's the link to their blog post about it. One of the big things I saw on here is something I really like is there's a Lost Omens travel guide. I think that's pretty neat. It's like sights to see, festivals, theaters, restaurants. That's really interesting and like adds so much flavor.
This stuff is good because I, as DM, I often don't really want to put in the work of bars and stuff because that's so much effort that I don't want to deal with.
A lot of my places tend to be very similar sometimes just because I default to the basic, it's a medieval tavern.
Yeah.
It's like there are flavors that can be added that aren't always easy to add on the fly, and having a source that you can kind of plan for some things is very nice.
Yeah. These festivals stuff is really good because that gives a lot of area lore that may or may not be present in
Yep.
the books. Because I don't know what's all in the Lost Omens campaign guide, because while I own it, I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. It's sort of like when they mention festivals, theaters, restaurants, sports competitions, fashions, and balls. It's sort of like, this is the world. Like, you have to think of, even if we would go back, there is like a medieval flair to a lot of fantasy kind of things. And granted, Pathfinder is more like Renaissance-y.
It's like late Renaissance.
Yeah, but that medieval flair, even during that time, a lot of this shit existed. It's just like, you don't talk about it as much because you just remember the peasants were dirty and poor, and like the nobles were very rich. And yes, but a lot of this stuff happened still too.
Yeah.
And it's good for like this, like, for building a society. I think.
Yeah, it builds the world a lot better.
Yeah.
I can, like, as a DM, I can, make up, oh, you're at, the Stone Tankard in Biggotyburg, and they've got this drink.
I can't remember where, but somewhere like mentioned like dinosaur racing or something, and I'm like, dinosaur racing, that's neat. It's like some city is known for it because of like, some reason, and I'm like, that's just a weird competition, sure, but it's it's in a fantasy world. You have dinosaur racing as your local sport. Oh, I did that. I think I did that because they were visiting. It was in Records of Evil. I was trying to come up with random sports, so I'm like,
nice.
Dinosaur racing.
Look, I mean, nothing is quite as good as when against Lightning's wishes I forced Axe Beaks to be native to an area because you wanted one.
It could have been imported. You're welcome. Other releases, they have the pocket edition of the Starfinder Armory, and we were just talking about their pocket edition, which are like their paperback books.
Yeah, I have a handy-dandy Game Master Guide, which isn't required to run Pathfinder 2nd Edition. However, the hardback book is like $70, and this little pocket edition was $24.99. It is very high-quality paperback. Hey Wizard, you should do this because I don't want to pay $60 for a book every time because these books are expensive.
Yeah, it's it's like, if you want us to play your game, don't make it a privilege to play the game. Make it something we can afford. Not everybody can afford the $60 book nowadays with a lot of like inflation and stuff like that, and especially so many of them.
They're also so big too. Yes. They're massive.
Well, it's sort of like Paizo has realized there is a time and a place for everything. And it's sort of like the big books, they're the classics, they still can sell those. But then, like, people don't mind paperbacks. And the small paperbacks or the big books, those are great. PDFs, it's sort of like, these are things that people want.
Like, if I was buying a physical core rulebook for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I would get a hardback because that is something if I run physical games, would be, like, handling with my players and stuff. A Game Master Guide, that's just for me. I'm the only one looking at that.
Yeah.
So I can be more careful with it.
There's, like, smart ideas, and I think Paizo is on the cusp of smart ideas when it comes to products.
Yeah. But yeah, it's this pocket edition of the Starfinder Armory book. It's a bunch of weapons and stuff.
Lost Omen Character Guide. They've just got the special edition, but they have it also now up on Roll20. So if you want to use stuff from the Character Guide, you can do it on Roll20. Again, they're continuing. Drift Crasher's got the new thing in their Adventure Pass. Bloodlord's got their next one, and then of course it's the normal.
You got the bounty, which is bounties are one shots for Pathfinder 2e.
They've got the flip maps, the scenario, the Pathfinder and Starfinder scenarios, which are sort of like
They're like mini campaigns.
yeah, they're like mini campaigns. They provide enough material for like a couple of maybe
And
a couple adventures.
You can slide them in as like the start of a campaign as well.
That yeah, they're made in such a way that they're information for because it's sort of like if you are running something from the Pathfinder Starfinder Society, certainly you could use it and continue with the storylines and stuff that they build over their seasons.
Yeah, like I'm already looking at this this one, the Years of Boundless Wonder. It's based around good old, or not Boundless Wonder, Return of the Grave, which is wonderful. Based around good old Whispering Tyrant. You know, if I wanted to, I could run this and then move the party into an Ustalav game.
Yeah, certainly much so. And I think that's why it's sorry, I'm hungry. I like them still. It's like they're not really a necessary thing, and you know they're there if you want them, but they're cool. So there's plenty of good products out, and certainly both the Travels Guide I'm really happy about, and you know more pocket guides and stuff like that. It's good.
Yep, always good.
Yep, they continue to do a good dish. Job. I wanted to talk about I got 2 RPG-based Kickstarters for today, and one of them, because I like to talk about these monsters and settings of the world kind of thing, we got Asian Monsters as a book. Legendary monsters from China, Japan, India, Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, and more.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I like this a lot because it does hit up China and Japan, but it's got others too.
Yeah.
Like those are the 2 that you get a lot of stuff from.
Yeah, you get a lot of stuff from Chinese and Japanese mythology. You don't really get a lot from like Korean or Vietnamese.
Yeah. Like even
especially not the Philippines.
I'm gonna be honest, even India you don't get a lot from, and that's really nice to have some like variety, definitely. It's funded.
Yeah, it can be easily used for good old 5th edition, Pathfinder 1st edition, or Pathfinder 2nd edition, which is really nice.
So they've got 100 creatures that they kind of put together of various groups. They've you know you can get these are the people that did some Latin American monsters that had 120 there and some other like mythological stuff. So they've done a lot of these kind of like of the world kind of things. Really, that's what their shtick kind of is. They have support on virtual tabletops like Fantasy Grounds, Foundry, and Roll20. What else is interesting about this that I want to mention? That's about it. I don't think they have like a stretch goals or anything. They're just like, yeah, they're just like, no, we don't have stretch goals. They say that.
Hey, that's fair.
Yeah, just like it's what it is. You know, if you want to buy it, good on you.
If you want to pay more, they have bundles for their other bestiaries. They have a Latin American one, a sort of a more like Great Old One mythos, and then they have the generic sea monsters.
I mean, that's all really neat. I mean, the sea monsters are a fun one too. You know, even a Midgard serpent. Oh, great! That's a sea monster, technically, I guess. No. More monsters is good, and like culturally inspired monsters is fun too. Because again, like when you come down to it, D&D has a lot of culturally inspired monsters from very European.
Yeah,
like
D&D, especially Forgotten Realms. Galarian's a little better with it, but still not as great. It's very Eastern European, very Western European. It's a little bit of America, but it's mostly just European. So a diverse set of monsters from other cultures is pretty good.
Yeah, I think Galarian is more like, when we visit an area, they include some monsters from that area, and it's like, oh, cool, there's some stuff from that flavor. But like,
Yeah, when we visit Forgotten Realms, it's just another part of the Swords Coast.
it's like the difference between visiting Galarian and visiting Forgotten Realms. The Forgotten Realms is one continent on an entire planet that they forget about. It's Toril. Everyone forgets about it.
No, we just get Swords Coast ad nauseum forever.
The difference between that and, oh wait, our good friend, Paizo and their thing there. Galarian's a planet.
Yeah.
Planet versus single region on a continent that we like.
But I really need to know what happens in Neverwinter this time, because everything happens in Neverwinter.
Or Baldur's Gate.
Or Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep. Those are the three where everything in the world happens.
Look, even if they gave me a good old Kalimport adventure, I like Kalimport. I had some adventures there because, our DM was like, I'm using it, but actually used more of it, of the realm. So I'd support more of that. Lantan, too. Please, even if you give me for Forgotten Realms, just give me somewhere else in Forgotten Realms. There are so many other cities and places.
I'm a little done with the Swords Coast.
Yeah, the Swords Coast is not the only region. It is just a small region, an entire continent. Give me the weird European analog that it is. Anyway, I think we can complain about this a lot. But,
yeah.
So I have a rules and settings book for 5e also here. Let me just throw it out here. It's another very, ironically, it's another very Asian-inspired one. It's the world of Kensei. It's basically like a kind of Asian setting. Again.
It's it's kind of Japan.
It's Japan.
it's mostly Japan.
Yeah.
Judging by what the creature arts are.
Yeah, I'd say this is a very Japan-centric one, which again, we get those in the kind of like the original adventures that were put together for 3rd edition stuff, and a lot of that was a little bit more China-centric, which is not bad either. But again, both of them, it's fine, whatever. I thought about it because it's like it seemed to be, of the Kickstarter RPGs this week, it's the one that seems the most put together, nice looking. I don't know. It's just like, I try to be nice to some of the other RPG stuff that's out there, but sometimes it's just,
some of it is not as well put together or presented.
You just look at it and you're like, that's kind of interesting, but only kind of. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
The art's really nice looking, honestly.
It's really good art.
Some new races and sub-races. They actually have apparently some kind of history and setting, actually, which is good. Hey, it's a different place that you can visit.
Yeah, you can slot it in anywhere.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
They had a few stretch goals that have been well. Where is this? So I know the SEC. What is SEC?
SEC is Swedish Corona, I think.
Oh.
I'm gonna double check though. Oh yeah, it's a Swedish Krona.
Okay. Apparently Swedish Krona is
And there's a lot of RPG makers from Sweden, because this is a currency that comes up a lot.
Yeah, but I was just seeing that it was apparently the goal was around 10,000, and the Swedish krona is 100,000 Swedish krona.
Yeah, the krona to American dollar, the krona is a little bit weak. It's a lot weaker, and also it's just kind of how they denote their currency.
Well, it's that kind of thing that, when people talk about the yen is cents almost for them.
It's it's mostly that just kind of has to do with exchange rates, not really buying things in the country,
Mm-hmm. But certainly it's neat, and it is fun to do. So it's another one of those ones that if you want to check it out and you're interested in it, please do. I put on it. It looks cool. Honestly,
very cool.
more settings better, because hopefully they're just slightly better done than Swords Coast.
$15 gets you the core rules and the adventure that comes with it.
Yeah, it's not bad for PDF stuff. Yeah,
Then
definitely.
$40 for PDFs and the books.
Yeah, it's actually not bad either for just a physical book. Yeah.
Cheaper than official releases.
Yeah, so keep it in mind and check it out if you're interested. All right. One of our last topics before we move into a topic and then the deeper discussion, because they're connected, is I wanted to talk about Smash Up Anniversary. I honestly wouldn't have realized this game is 10 years old. I'm a fan of Smash Up.
I've never played it.
It's
I've
it's
seen
one of
it
those
played,
games
I think.
that I feel like does have a little bit too many expansions, I will say.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of the expansions.
The good thing about it is I feel like it's better than Munchkin when it comes to expansions. Because of the nature of it is that, like, you take 2 decks of cards, shove them together, and that's your deck for the game. And everybody does that, and you kind of randomly take for them. That makes it that, yes, you have a little bit of that too much expansion problem, and maybe have to find a way to, like, store these. But it also means that, like, you're not getting the, Munchkin, what deck am I drawing from? No, you probably have just, like, I think it's what it is. It's like there's like a card that represents your faction. They shuffle them all together, and you pull like 2 out, and those are your 2 factions. For the game. That makes it really easy to have a lot of these.
Yeah,
honestly.
and I appreciate that the names of these Smash Up sets are actually funny, unlike the Munchkin ones.
Yeah.
God,
the cease and desist is that
cease and desist, which is Star Wars and Star Trek,
and also apparently like Transformers.
Transformers, yeah. Changer bots,
Astronauts, and Star Rover.
Yep.
Oh wait, It's Your Fault was dragons, mythical Greeks, sharks / torpedoes, and superheroes.
Yep.
No, they what were you thinking was a good one too. Teddy bears, grandmas, rock stars, and explorers. Look, they have very silly kind of way of doing things, and it works pretty well. And like, yes, they have a couple obligatory.
The obligatory Cthulhu set. Yeah, everything has to have one of those.
And they technically had a crossover with Munchkin, and a crossover.
We got a Marvel one, which is, I mean, I've seen the Marvel one before come up.
Yeah, they're fine.
Like as announced and stuff.
But yeah, they're coming out with this 10th anniversary. So they're celebrating that they've been around for 10 years, and they've certainly thrown out a lot of stuff. I've not played with a lot of these bonus sets. It's like, most of what I've played with is the core set, because I think Joe owns it, and honestly, I think I've just played with the base stuff when it comes to like Tabletop Sim. Again, it's a pretty fun game. It can have a lot of. It's one of those ones that it because of the nature of it, it can have a lot of expansions, which feels like too much. But if you get them all and play with them, it's fine. It's not difficult to do, in comparison to, let's say, Munchkin, or like, Flux, where you're only playing with one Flux at a time. I love Flux, but you're only playing with one at a time. There's at least a little better that way. So I did want to shout it out. It's a one that I do enjoy a bunch. So Smash Up. And finally, I've got, honestly, something decent from USAopoly.
Oh boy, USAopoly.
Yeah, they're putting out a Nightmare Before Christmas game.
That's it's not bad.
Merry Madness. It's I guess because it's kind of Halloween-y Christmas area, they're doing it time period.
Yeah, it is both. It's a Halloween movie and a Christmas movie.
Yeah. It's sometimes a movie is both, and you have to accept that.
Yeah.
It's just like Die Hard is a really great action film, and it's also a Christmas film. You can't argue with that.
True.
There's another one that I can't remember that I know is a Christmas film, and I keep forgetting. But
Home Alone's a Christmas film.
It is Christmas film. It was
Momo
something.
and stuff was bad.
I know. It was like either like an action or like one of those like action horror movies from the 80s that was like
Oh
it takes place at
God.
Katie. It takes place at Christmas, and I'm like, it takes place at Christmas. Oh, I guess it is a Christmas film. And there's like a storyline related to being at Christmas time or something there, so it is kind of a Christmas movie. But anyway, so yeah, it's honestly I feel like the nature of this game, it's really just a game that's got a Nightmare Before Christmas skin more than anything. But it does look like a fun little game for $25. That's about, gift wrapping and presents and stuff like that, and tokens. So, it doesn't look like a bad game. It just looks relatively simple, probably a little fun. And honestly, if you like Nightmare Before Christmas a lot, there's worse products that have the face of it on there.
There really are. There's like a lot of Nightmare Before Christmas garbage out there.
This is like one of those ones that I'm like, hey, you know what? Sure. I don't need it to have Nightmare Before Christmas, but, if it does, that's fine.
Yeah. Like, I mean, when I worked at Walmart, every Halloween, it was just something new with this product on it. Most of it bad and not worth your money.
Yeah. That's very true. A lot of times there's a lot of products. I mean, like, I scroll down to the bottom of here, and there's stuff on the bottom of here that I'm just like, nope, we're going away from that.
Yeah, I can already see,
They're Nightmare Before Christmas products, just nope.
Yep.
Nope.
That's short, whatever.
Anyway, let's talk about our last topic, which will lead into our deeper discussion topic. I guess, Momo, you know more about this entire setup than me, and you've talked more about it. So why don't you talk about it?
I will pull up two things. I will pull up the apology preemptively.
Okay.
Because
this is Wizard's apology about it?
Yeah, it was actually, like, for once, a not spit out corporate apology.
That's good.
They actually, I think, recognized they were wrong.
Okay.
I can find that. It's on their Twitter somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is I pull up the conversation I had with someone. So I can remember the footnotes.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Yeah, so, the, Hadozee, that's how it said, right?
Hadozee, I think that's
Hadozee, from Spelljammer, were released, obviously in the Spelljammer book. Some glaring issues came up with it that, to my understanding, some creators who are like African American creators and content creators and such had pointed out that some of the depictions of the Hadozee.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, someone's knocking on my door.
Okay. I think the thing I can add in about this is that, they're...
Sorry about that.
Yeah. The thing I was going to add about it is, like, if we look at old Spelljammer 2nd edition and stuff, they're just a wandering mercenary race that came from some kind of world. They're basically a Spelljammer race, They don't say a lot about where they came from that world, how they got off that planet, because it's sort of like a lost history kind of thing of their own people, which is a fine thing to have. It's a fine thing to have. You can be like, you can make up stories about that. You can use whatever story you want if it would come up in your game as to why the Hadozee left hundreds of generations ago from their home planet and became a wild space race.
So some of the depictions, they are a little bit. I should preface this. You don't know what they are a monkey, like an uplifted monkey race of people.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of originally Planet of the Apes-esque, I think, in their at least 3rd edition lore kind of deal. I don't know how they were in 2nd edition.
It's like
I've never played 2nd edition. Never read any of the 2nd edition lore.
They're like ape sailors, was what it was, which was kind of... That's not a very planet, but they also have, like, the interesting about it, they're great with the rigging because they also have like
Like,
like
got the
flaps that they can glide a little bit.
yeah, they got the weird wings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they are in 5th edition. And I don't believe this was done intentionally at all. I think this was just a severe oversight on their part. I want to preface that. They are a monkey-like alien race that were uplifted by wizards to be enslaved, and then they were set free by another wizard down the line, and they liked being enslaved. It gets a little worse. The bard art, and I don't have it with me, but I have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
The art as a bard example of one of them is very reminiscent of depictions of minstrel shows, if you know what those are, from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, it is a really bizarre thing for them to miss when they've just released Radiant Citadel, which is one of the most accepting and diverse adventures. And again, I don't believe this was done with any intention or malice. I simply believe the writers didn't think about how this comparison could be made, and the editors also missed it. And I also think that Spelljammer was an overall rushed book because everyone is currently focusing on the new iteration of D&D. So I think it's just that series of mistakes and issues have led to this problem. And naturally, I didn't really draw that comparison until it was pointed out to me by someone at a little bit early in the morning when I had woken up. And then I looked into it, and I'm like, yeah, no, that I can see why people are mad.
Mm-hmm.
But Wizards has put out an apology, and it's actually a decently, actually a genuine apology. It's not the same corporate babble you get from something like Ubisoft or EA or Hasbro when they fuck up. They have since removed the offensive content and are working to replace it. So, if you got it on D&D Beyond, chunks of lore will be gone currently, but when it is replaced, it says those will be put in as replacements.
Yeah.
Such a bizarre situation for Wizards to put themselves in.
I'm just checking old Spelljammer books just to see
Because
some stuff
I
on
don't recall them being that way in old Spelljammer.
I don't think they mentioned anything about their origin, honestly.
No, I don't believe that they were ever mentioned.
The only thing about their history that is mentioned in the two main places they show up in Spelljammer books are during the Unhuman Wars. They were a good ally of the elves, and since then, elves have respected them and oftentimes employ them in a lot of ships. Again, elves' superiority, they don't consider them an equal, but they're sort of like, we like you better than some of the other races around here.
From my chat with a good friend, it sounded like the new lore was the elves were the ones that enslaved them. Which is not really how they're supposed to be. They added that in, which feels really weird.
Yeah.
And I think it would be 100% totally fine to have this if it was like any other kind of race. As someone who is a history major, I do know how fucked up specifically North American history is with topics like this.
Yeah.
And I can tell you without a doubt, I have seen many depictions of African Americans as monkeys, and it is a disgusting comparison.
Yeah, and the thing is like, the Hidose, the way that they were in 2nd edition, there was no comparison. Like, this is making a comparison because they made effort in a way to make it. Like, the thing is, the Hidose were never supposed to be that human. Like,
No.
They don't wear a lot of clothes. They wear very little. They're supposed to be very Chewbacca-y. Like, the thing is, like, you can make comparisons for, like, a species like Chewbacca with stuff that happens in Star Wars and stuff like that. But at least, when you do terrible things with a species that's inhuman, it doesn't. It's still bad because we recognize it's bad, and you can tell stories like that. But it also doesn't feel like you're making fun of real world counterparts. Then, a little bit.
A lot of things, and this is something I've seen in, unfortunately, in a lot of the online D&D space, because, again, online is where you're going to get all the really terrible people.
Mm-hmm.
Just how it's always going to be, is they don't understand the issue with this, and why it is potentially problematic, and why someone could view it as such a comparison. It's just been a whole unfortunate situation really the past day or so.
Yeah, I think it's another thing about them is that Hidose in the old editions were basically they worked as mercenaries or crewmen. They really didn't lead ships and stuff. The entire thing about they mention about their life cycle is they go out and they like to serve and stuff, and then when they get too old, they retire back to one of the planets and stuff, and then start a family. That's their way. It's they spend their youths out on the space seas and stuff like that, and they're very crew for hire, because honestly, they don't really care to have ships of their own, which is fine. Not everybody has to have your own ships.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you couldn't be one that does have your own ship. You just be the exception to the rule, which is fine. You have those.
Player characters and important NPCs are the most outlier of their group.
Yeah. So because there isn't a lot on the original leaving of Hidoses from their home planet, and going out into space, and connecting with the world, you can come up with a storyline that would reflect stuff like that. But a wizard did it, and slavery are not great directions to take with it.
You can still have. Really don't. Just don't. Just don't.
Yeah, because also if you're implying it's the elves, it's the storyline for the elves that was in the original Spelljammer was, Spelljammer space elves are kind of I will tell you, they are the, I wouldn't say the racism, but the distrustism of other species to the extreme a lot.
Yeah, they're very elitist.
Yeah.
About themselves.
Granted, part of it is reasonable because without them, the Unhuman Wars would have lost, in which that was all the goblinoid races and their ships, led by the orcs, basically try to take over all of space. And it required, the elves basically organized everybody to fight back. And that's why they're seen as very important still, even though people think they're jerks, they're respected. It's sort of God, you guys are so up about it. You saved the universe one time, and then you're just up in arms about it all the time.
Yeah, there are some things in the lore from older editions that are maybe a little questionable, the term deck ape, but they're monkeys, and that's a military slang. That's just a thing. The U.S. Navy calls boatswains that. Yeah. That's a thing. That's fine, but really it's just what they did with 5th edition is just so bizarre to me.
And I think you could update some of this stuff and make it a little better and stuff like that, and refine it a little bit. But, the direction they went is, lore that wasn't needed.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing about it. They weren't correcting lore, they just wrote new stuff.
They added it in, and I don't know why they felt the need to. That they were always pretty clear to me that, hey, these guys they're just kind of mercenaries that go around and do stuff. That's fine. You don't really need anything more than that.
I got a question. Do they explain why the GIF and how the GIF came to space?
I don't know, actually, because I've not read Spelljammer. I don't know if the GIF are ever really explained. They might be.
They might not be.
But I'm not sure.
But that's the thing is, if they're not, it's the exact same thing. Why not explain them also then? It's sort of it was an extra explainer that wasn't needed. You could just be they're a spacefaring race.
Yeah.
And could have left it at that. Yeah. I don't know. It's just...
post Wizard's apology for anyone who wants to read it. I think it's actually a decent apology, which leads me to believe they actually genuinely fucked up instead of this being an actual decision that they intended to make.
Yeah, that can make sense. That
Because the removal of it immediately and trying not to justify it, especially points that, and the fact that they have been trying to move away from the more unfortunate lore side of things from original D&D that are still somewhat present in modern D&D.
I think it's the thing that original D&D was written in a different time period,
Yes.
and trying to like update the lore isn't always easy, because I feel like it's sometimes it's sort of like you want to like make the lore more, not only more societal in our own way of doing things, but more what feels like an actual society sometimes too. You can have terrible things, but you want to make them... That's why we're coming to our deeper discussion concept. There's controversial topics you can have. You can have slavery as a topic. You can have things like other controversial and terrible things as a topic. You know, war, genocide, atrocities. You know, we've talked about there are like bad things that can happen. You know, that like, you know, things like murder, rape, and all those other bad crimes. There are bigger, more systemic things you can add in. Like think about this. Chelix has slaves.
Yeah.
You know, in Galarian. Like, most nations don't agree to slaves. There's a couple neutral ones that are like, whatever. But, like, you know, certainly, as a lawful evil nation, they have a slave system. You know? Granted, the way they do that is because Galarian is a very worldly place, because it is like a post-apocalyptic. They're not like pointing out one people. They're just like, you know, we conquered you, or you're a prisoner, or something like that. Oh, you're a slave now. You know, they do. They're just general with slavery, which is still, you know,
it's not great.
Not great.
But you can't draw. It doesn't draw from real world comparisons.
You're not oppressing a certain person.
Yeah.
Or group. You know. Which, I mean, like, honestly, there have been precedents for things like more legal slavery, like, you know, prisoners or like, you know, debtors can become slaves or stuff, which is still bad, but there are systems in place where, you know, we have less complaints about those systems because they were at least, you know, lawful, I guess.
Things like serfdom and such. Very real world things that were genuinely terrible, but...
Yeah. Lightning's
we don't
World,
look at them as terrible.
Lightning World has third-class citizens in borderline slavery, because that kind of thing, you know, big wars and stuff, a lot of stuff can happen that can have effects like that. And another thing is, honestly, you can have levels of systemic racism and stuff like that can exist. A society could be bad. But the thing is, it should be like, if your players have the option of that kind of thing, make it more optional.
Should be done in such a way that if a player is uncomfortable with it, they don't have to engage with it.
Yeah. It's sort of like...
I will say, as someone who is LGBT and in a same-sex relationship, I deal with certain prejudices every day of my life. I don't want to deal with them in my fantasy game that I use for escapism.
Yeah. There are certain things that are like, they're topics that you really don't want to leave into too much. Like, honestly, like, heavy personal bigotry is kind of like a hard thing to deal with. Granted, like, and like, unnecessary sometimes. Like, you know, you could have a character that's infamous for, like, you know, disliking certain things, but you don't have to have it like that character, like, be directly confrontational to your players and their way of doing stuff and things like that. Honestly, you can have, let's say, like, a human guy who's horribly racist against dwarves. You could have that in a storyline, but the thing is, I probably wouldn't use that if I have a dwarf character, for one thing, and honestly, I would probably use it in such a way that it's, like, more indirect, honestly, and more a story item rather than an interaction, you know, sort of like...
like, you can make your villains have these kind of beliefs, but I'm gonna be real honest. Um, a whole
Yeah,
lot of
can't be
people who
compared.
make D&D games do not handle these topics well.
No, no, and it can't be the whole character. And honestly, the other thing I have to say about it is you have to have a really good reason for it. You know,
Yeah, like if I join a game and the villain is like Leonardo DiCaprio's character from Django Unchained, I ain't gonna be in that game. I don't want to engage with that.
yeah,
I don't want to deal with that.
like I could say the main villain of like a political game could be like a human who has horrible like racism against dwarfs, and maybe
Yeah,
their plan is to manipulate a nation into declaring war against like a dwarven nation that's weaker than them. That's a storyline you could have, and like, okay, you see his motivation. That's why he kind of just, for whatever reason, hates dwarfs a lot and wants to go to war to go against them. And so
yeah,
you can manipulate against him without a lot of that like shittery around it too. And see, that's what's making it like. Granted, there's better reasons that you can use, but personal, more vitriolous reasons aren't bad too. Yeah, like the
yeah.
dwarf took his father's job as a blacksmith one time, and he swore revenge against them. He got rich, and now, like, it's like there's that's kind of a very villainistic. Like, honestly,
Yeah,
the entire thing is.
in the one setting I use, my cyberpunk setting, one of the organizations was very human supremacist because they're from a city that was basically just annexed off of the human government
Mhm.
by a number of non-human people, and they just kind of, because of the situation, don't like non-humans and want to kick them out of the city.
See, that was a thing that we had in the background, so it made us
But
suspect.
you didn't have to engage with it.
Yeah,
Is the thing, and you chose not to, and that's fine.
and the thing is, I think giving the option not to engage is good, because then the players, as a group, can choose what they want to engage with and what they're comfortable engaging with. You can present a lot of these real-world problems and scenarios because they exist in various levels and stuff like that. You just have to be open to, if they don't want to, work around it, you know? Human man with his father's job lost, wants to get revenge, kind of thing. You don't maybe have to directly engage with him. You can use political machinations and deal directly with like some other government officials and manipulate them, and like you don't have to talk to him. You can go find allies of your own and convince the king war bad, some other nobles, and make friends with them. And there you go. You foiled his plans and do like, curse you! I shall one day get my revenge against the dwarfs. Because honestly, like, that idea is like very textbook, like silly villain.
It's a common villain trope.
Yeah, they want
I think it's
revenge.
want revenge against a group of people because they did X thing.
Yeah, and it's really just one individual did X thing, and really the group of people shouldn't be to blame, and et cetera, et cetera. And, dwarves or people from this city or something like this can be very easily blamed, and, that is one of those things. Yeah, see, and his father's a terrible smith and didn't know better at the time. That's the irony, is that kind of stuff happens a lot of times.
Yeah.
And granted, I think where the issue comes in is, like, which I think, fortunately, there isn't a lot of in the media, is sort of just, like, general hatred for no reason.
Yeah.
That's a thing in a real world, and generally speaking, you can have hatred and distrust in general, but I feel like a lot of times it's, in real world, there's always, like, people that are put to blame a lot of times and things to put to blame, and, it's easy to blame. I think you kind of have to keep things general. Like, rather than make them, like, this one group, this one city, and this one nation horribly racist against this other ones, make them, like, a little xenophobic or something, That way they have a general distrust. And maybe the one group is their neighbor, so they're particularly bad against it. Like, you could have, like, this human nation with elven neighbors. They're a little xenophobic against anybody. Their elves are particularly bad because they're their neighbor and they're always next to them, and maybe they're like worried that they're spying on them and stuff like that. But you're like, they would distrust anybody. You can then kind of have that there, and like it's not good. But also, here's a great thing: have people open to listen. Like if you have a relation like that, like have it like have those revelations that if they have your people like talk with some people for a while, maybe if you feel like they need to for what they want to say, make a couple persuasion checks. They could be like, you're not so bad. I'm sorry.
I'll use Chelix as an example. Chelix is a very good example because they're dealing with enslaving people.
Yeah.
Not everyone in Chelix is okay with slavery.
Yeah.
There are a large number of people who are not.
Mm-hmm.
You believe in some of the adventure paths, you engage with such people because you're trying to make Chelix a better place. The government may be fine with it, but a lot of the general population might not be and might actually be against such a thing.
And even if they aren't, they could be just kind of indifferent, and you could just be like, here's reasons why it's bad, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right, that is kind of bad. I didn't even think about it that way because, I wouldn't have known about it here in my time in Chelix. They don't talk about that kind of thing. Because that's kind of the kind of thing is, you could just make it that, this stuff, hatred, is just, something that's endemic because no one taught them better. They didn't learn. They didn't understand.
People can learn.
Yeah. And making that something you can do is also very good. That, because people have the capacity to learn. Certainly in real life, there are plenty of pig-headed people that, in all walks of life that are very hard to teach. Not impossible, but they make themselves harder to teach. Don't go for those people. Those people are difficult for everybody's life. Everybody has a relative like that that's really dead set in their ways, and you can't talk to them. You can't explain to them no matter what you're trying to explain them about. They just won't listen. Yep. People like that. Everybody does. Don't have those kind of people. Those are not the people you want to engage with. You want to engage with the people that'll listen to you. Yeah, hate has no reason is often injected in children. So I think, hate, racism, they're very heavy topics. And there are other heavy topics you can have with, that goes in different directions, too. Like, granted, things like, we've talked about, some controversial stuff on bigger scale before. Things like, honestly, I could mention something like a genocide kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's an issue. That can be something, you can use because, but you have to be smart about it, It's, again, I think we talked about it before, how, you don't, you can see the after effects, but seeing it happen is a different thing, you can react to it and then try to plan to stop it rather than, try to interrupt it, because that's kind of hard. It's hard because it's also something bad's happening in the middle of that time, and you have to try to stop a bad happening at the same time.
Yeah, just be careful with the themes you're going to use.
Yeah,
especially if you're writing lore for an entire group of people.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things is considering going back to the Spelljammer things, the elves. Elves have always been a higher than thou group in fantasy writing, but most of the time it's because they're older, they live longer, they feel like they have the experience, and to a degree that is true. They're older, they live longer, they have more experience, but it oftentimes means that they are a little stubborn when it comes to listening to others, which is not necessarily good, because though that person might be younger, not live as long, and maybe not know as much, but they might have a good idea or something in that particular point in time. That's why I feel like elven adventurers are kind of those ones that are willing to listen to everybody. They're kind of I'm probably really great to be here, but sometimes you get these nice guys that are my friends here. They got some good opinions. It's sort of like Legolas learning that not all dwarfs are bad in Lord of the Rings, or whatever their preconceived notions of dwarfs are in the same back from Gimli.
Yeah, I mean...
They became best pals.
Well, they became a little more than that.
Yes, but that's the first part.
Yeah.
There were a lot of relationships in that storyline. Anyway, but it's the idea that, there is that kind of... set idealism in elves, and like I feel like because of the nature of the way they're presented, it's not a terrible thing to leave that kind of mindset to a degree in there. They are long-lived. They are probably, got more experience than a lot of people. But again, opening it up to, like, what they have respect for other groups or something like I got the idea, like, what they wrote into the Hodose thing, where, like, the Hodose served with them. They might not see Hodose as an equal to them, because, again, like, they don't live as long, they don't learn as much in their eyes, but they're like, but, you're a good people to have as friends.
Yeah.
Because you help us out, and you helped us out here. Oftentimes, elves like humans a lot of times, because humans are, like, generally helpful most of the time.
Yep.
Most. I mean, they get in arguments about dwarfs, but that's more like, we should live underground versus live in the forest, I always feel like. That's just a stupid argument. But, you can make it that, like, just because you have a superiority complex doesn't mean you're racist.
Yeah.
There you go. I think that's the thing. Superiority complex is one thing. Racist is another thing. Separate those out. They can be together. So you can have your hoity-toity elves. Just don't make them super dicks. I don't know.
It's a hard one. I've certainly used certain concepts in my games. I don't think you've ever been in one of my sort of more dark fantasy games I run, but I use a lot of Inquisitions and such things. And if you know anything about history, Inquisitions are never good people.
No.
But I never directly show what they do. I only show the aftermath. Or I'll have the party show up before they're going to do something, or as they're starting to do it, and the party can stop them and save people. I really think it's really difficult to have certain concepts front and center.
I think it's one of those things that I did like what Paizo did. Because Paizo separated the ideal of a Inquisitor from an Inquisition.
Yep.
And that they did a really good job. The Inquisitor class is fun to play, and it's not, you can be religious directly, or you can not be.
Yeah, like Misty, who is an Inquisitor, I've never delved deep into it, because again, no one's really ever asked questions about her background, but I have hinted that she has, because she was a Cheliax Inquisitor, has been involved in things that are not great. Specifically hinting at she was often used to kill political rivals of people who were, accused of heresy and stuff. So like priests and shit. Maybe those people were just trying to make Cheliax better, but the people in charge didn't want that direction for the country, so they sent in their Inquisitors.
Yeah. And that's a little bit more political than anything. It's a combination of that kind of religious political movement that, like, Cheliax tends to use religion with their political power, It's they're not necessarily a religious state, but they're kind of partially one, I guess you would say the way to do it. I'd see it a little bit more like old medieval European countries, where, like, kings were technically heads of, like, religious, even though they were not priests or anything at all, so they had a lot of say when it came to religion. So it's sort of like that kind of situation for Cheliax. And, certainly, the idea of, like, playing, like, an Inquisitor, like, you can play an Inquisitor in Ustalav, your entire thing is, I hunt undead.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, it's...
there's a whole, like, Inquisitor archetype for just killing vampires.
Yeah. It's the idea that you're a person that has a divine inspiration that then is built to hunt things and fight against things that are against that. And, most of the time, that tends to be, like, evil or monsters.
Yeah.
I think that's also what it makes it work. Is that, like, an Inquisitor specifically, like, in a group that's, like, a bunch of adventurers is one thing. Like, a team of Inquisitors is like,
Mhm.
then you're getting into something a little bit more.
Yeah, like
funky.
it's not baked into the class, but I chose to make it part of my character's backstory.
Yeah.
I made the conscious decision of I'm going to have this character who has done some pretty bad stuff like years ago and then escaped to this place.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I agree with Lightning there. Pure evil and thrown in your face is hard to swallow. And I think I think it's the difference is that like it's hard to have a villain that is truly pure evil because getting pure evil is honestly unreasonable. You know, I think that's the one thing about it. And then like also you can't display that in a great way a lot of times.
Because pure evil has a lot of real life bases.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of real life events that people are deeply affected by.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really do it in a sensitive way in D&D, especially if you are someone who doesn't have the cultural experience with such events. Even myself, who has a background in history education and is of Jewish origin, I would never run genocide in my game because I don't think I could ever do it in a sensitive way because you can't.
I would I kept whenever I used it simple ways like undead. They just want to kill all the life.
Yeah.
You know, that's a genocide, but undead are a completely different thing. You know, they're very alien. They're anathema. They're the dead that has raised from the grave. You know, kind of thing. They want to make everything like them, like a group of them. That is a way you can play it. The other way I did it was I basically said, and this is something I established, is one of the things in the Madness and Land storyline is the world they were coming from was a world of death. You know, the city was transported from. The idea was after like it was a Pangea continent after a massive war, all of the races that were basically savage. You know, this was definitely like kind of the thing that was not a good thing in the past. You know, like they threw all the giants, ogres, all the goblin races, orcs, all into this one area, and made a giant magical barrier to keep them out.
Mm-hmm.
And left them there sealed away. They basically purged their known continent of every kind of bad humanoid race.
Yeah, I mean, as Lightning says, Lightning ran a villain who was a lich that wanted, like, pretty much everyone but elves to just die, right? But that's, like, it detached from reality, because it's an undead.
Yeah, and this was some force basically took over them, united them all, and broke the barrier and led them on a basically, we will destroy everything else and remove you all from this continent so we have it now. War. And as I was saying is, anybody that was reasonable could notice that their forces were basically dying out too. It's what it was, is their leader didn't really care if everybody died.
Yeah. And there's a difference between running just pure genocide and running a war for survival, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A war for survival is a little less on the hitting real world and more on the they're kind of like, you know, that's like kind of comic book level evil, or like video game level evil.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like it kind of was the storyline, which I'd probably like keep most of that kind of the same. But it's the idea that like technically their leader like served like a deity of chaos that wanted to bring the world back to nil. So their plan was have everyone murder each other. Like the goblinoids would have won this war, wiped out all of the other races, but in the meantime basically destroyed themselves.
Yeah.
And
it's like how I think, and this is going to sound dumb, but I think something like Halo handles this kind of story pretty well, mostly due to the fact that it's incredibly detached from actual reality.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that, hey, this big, you know, galaxy-spanning empire is like, oh, hey, you just deserve to die because you would, like, invalidate our entire religion, so we kind of need to to get rid of you, but then, oh shit, other people in our empire found out, and now we're having a big civil war.
I mean, that's an interesting concept too. It's sort of like, you know, I think it's one of those things that like, I'm gonna be honest, playing a spiritual group in Stellaris, a lot of times is sort of like, you get choices sometimes that draw you away from spiritualism or just draw you back to it about like, you know, which direction do you choose? Do you just use the existence of these things to reaffirm your spiritualism, or do you maybe take in a direction that leads you towards violence? You know? That's an idea, because spiritualism can have that result. You have to have way faith, and you know, your faith, it can either be bent or broken. It can be involved, or it can be so set in stone that it can draw to not great things and violence oftentimes, unfortunately.
Yeah, the adventure I ran in Kitsuden did have some darker themes to it, but I felt I kept them enough undescribed so they wouldn't be uncomfortable.
I agree. There wasn't a lot of like...
It's like the party knew that, hey, people were being kidnapped and then like forcibly changed into these monsters, but I never showed it.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta be honest, like, that comes away from, like, a lot of, like, you know, that's, like, more horror trope at that point in time, you know, like, you know, that's things that can happen in horror, you know, that, like, people are, like, are abducted and changed into more other creatures. That's very, you know, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or something like that, you know? Which... that has connotations of itself that give us unusual feelings, you know? Granted, in like a movie or something where it's very unrealistic, we can usually deal with it more. But that like concept is not... it's not a friendly one to people, you know, I think is what it is. And so bringing it into other sources and making it more realistic is harder for people.
Yeah. And it's the big thing of if you have something really like dark happening, just telling the party about it and showing them the aftermath is better than showing them the actual process of it, because you can certainly describe things too far.
Mm-hmm. Like, you know, one of the things, like, I just thought about this. With the kobolds, because they were a starving army, you could have had us come across a village where there were signs of bones there that were eaten by kobolds. That, you know, we just see that in bones. We don't really interact with that. There's not a lot to it. It's just like they went through the village and decided eat all the people. That's kind of a dark thing, but
that's what kobolds do.
Yeah, I don't think they generally eat people, but they could.
They do eat. They usually they will eat humans. I know that's at least part of their life.
I think it's sort of like
it's an if they have to thing, I think.
Yeah, as well. I mean, it's not easy to get hold of a human and like eat them.
Because also, like, lizard folk will also just eat people.
Yeah, I mean, like Pathfinder, they got better.
Yeah,
I like how they did improve. Like, it's the idea that like there's a difference between first edition lizard folk and second edition lizard folk because they made him more of a character. They gave him an actual name, Rooksy, which is like their name for their species in their language, and then they had this entire like thing of like. Yeah, more recently they've been opening up to the rest of the world and trying to become citizens of it. You know, that's why you get more Rooksy adventurers and stuff too nowadays, because like they had been very xenophobic into themselves because again, like reptile versus mammal, you know, they're very like distrustful of these mammals which are very different from them, you know, and they're trying to be part of the world more and getting away from like some of these worse habits that they had. It shows that like can be. I like that because it's an interesting evolution of the species, and again, I like what they do with the Rooksy there. I like playing them.
I think overall that yeah, true. I think that Paizo has handled it a lot better than Wizards has with the more controversial topics.
I think it's what it is Paizo looks at the version of the world they have and says like, how did this evolve, you know, a lot of times. And granted, like, there can be areas that have issues or rules that are very, like, stifling and stuff, very, like, lawful or very, like, places like that, like Chalix and stuff like that. But there's a lot of places where, like, honestly, because it's the idea that it is a again, a post-apocalyptic world that we
Mm-hmm.
built into this, like, magical renaissance. Like, a lot of people are just, like, happy to be around with all the shit and stuff that goes around, and they're just like, look, we got bigger problems to worry about, than caring about, like, are a man or a woman or who you love or anything like that. There's a giant dragon monster that wants to eat half of us, you know? Galarian is filled with a lot of horrible, deadly monsters. A lot of places. You have bigger things to worry about a lot of times. You as the regular citizen are like, should I leave my village on a journey, or will I be attacked by bandits, dragons, giant bears? I don't know. But
I think when you want to run these concepts, just be careful and try to do it in a very sensitive way. And ask, like, if you have friends who are DMs, ask them if, hey, do you think that this is too much? Right? Because that's something I do. If they're not in the game I'm running, I will ask a friend, if, like, hey, do you think this is maybe a little too much to throw in? Because I certainly do that with monsters in their lore.
And here's the thing, because it is still not great, but it goes over a little better. If you want to add a sexism society in your world, go for the female first one. Go for that one. It's a little bit more accepted, unfortunately. It's kind of like there's, like, double standards in a lot of shit.
Yeah.
That's one of those double standards you could probably get away with if you really want to do something like that. Because,
I mean, that's just how the Drow are.
Yeah. Drow
matriarchy.
Yeah, and Drow fine as a matriarchy. They just need. Again, I feel like they need some work and, like, in certain ways. And I don't know. I like the idea that they're much more of a neutral society, honestly, with, like, a very with their religion being a very evil religion. That's fine. Neutral evil religion and, like,
the last thing I'll say on this, and this is more of a general statement about this topic and the discussion that has been ongoing since the one D&D UA came out. There's been a certain takeaway I've seen of it is, hey, they've removed the racism aspect of certain races. I was using that. I'm mad about it. If your takeaway from the D&D, the one D&D UA, and from these new lore changes is they took my racism away, I think you need to rethink some stuff about your games. Because, well, you can have these topics. If that's, like, a major thing that's forward present in your game, that's a little messed up.
Like, I can see in a world you design where, there are certain things you want to do and storylines you want to do. Like, I'll tell you this one here that relates to this. A friend of mine had, I think he didn't run this world. He played in this world, but it was a world design that was a very violent and deadly world. And one of the wars that had happened was gnomes basically conquered all the halflings and basically took them over, made them second-class citizens, or killed off a lot of them. And gnomes are portrayed in this world as very, not all of them, but a lot of them are pretty evil, in this world. You've set them up to be kind of a villain species because they did something bad like this. And halflings are, like, on the outlier, a lot of them. Halflings are a lot rarer, or, like, they're, when you're playing, and, he made it, the person, you can do bad stuff that happened in the past like that. That's a storyline where, probably halflings, or I mean gnomes, are probably really racist against halflings in general.
Yeah.
It's just like,
don't put it at the forefront.
You're making that they're
interaction.
Maybe the entire, like, murder and conquer a lot of them is the worst part you want to pick part forward rather than the hatred part. You know?
Like, you don't want to generalize, hey, this group of people is just super racist all the time. Because that's one that's just kind of not how real world works, first off.
Yep.
And also, it's like, just kind of shit to your players if they want to play a halfling. And the other part of this is you can just, the first rule of D&D, the DM decides the lore and rules.
Mm-hmm.
So you can subtly have these, but again, if your main takeaway from the little text part that says tieflings are more accepted is they took away my racism against tieflings, I think that's a little bit concerning about me.
I'll tell you how my friend wanted to play halfling solve this problem. He declared himself Bearclaw, the halfling barbarian, who served Jeff, the halfling god of baked goods, and his entire goal as a halfling barbarian was to liberate his people from the gnomes.
Hey, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good goal. And you can certainly have characters that want to fight against it.
Yep. And that was like a good way of, like, he made this like halfling barbarian, and he did make the funny name and called himself, he served Jeff, the halfling god of baked goods, which was just, it was just this weird thing. I'm like, you just really like took the wind out of the seriousness of that to a great degree. And he's like, yep, I did. He wanted to do that. He just was like, you know what? That's a serious thing. I'm going to take the wind out of that a little bit, but also play up to it. I guess it's like kind of like Badger was. Badger took the wind out of some seriousness, but he still could be a serious character kind of thing. He had still serious goals and stuff. He just took some wind out of like some of like the darker elements sometimes.
And sometimes you should have that in a game.
So, yeah, I think that kind of hits up that there are always going to be concepts that are always described as controversial, very bad ones, very terrible ones. There's some more that we haven't hit up on. I gotta be honest, to step back a little bit from something like as dark as genocide, but like even like a mass murder or, honestly, serial killers.
Something, this last thing I will mention is something mentioned. I don't believe it is mentioned in the player's handbook for D&D. However, it is mentioned in the Game Mastery Guide and the Ravenloft book for D&D. Is something you can do if you want to have your darker themes. If you're in a IRL game, this works a lot better. Is you can hand players a card with an X on it, and if anything that is coming up is making them uncomfortable, they can hold up the card without vocalizing anything, and they can let you know they want to just kind of move past this part. And that is a way that you can still have these darker themes while not forcing players to interact with something they really don't want to or are uncomfortable with.
Yeah. It's... And again, like, certainly, you don't always know what person's level of comfort is. You can try your best to, like, avoid something bad, but it certainly could happen. I think it's the thing you have to think about, too, sometimes, is just to be careful about it. And certainly, if you as a player, like, it's just something that's a little bit more incidental, that, like, it's, like, just a little uncomfortable, not really big uncomfortable, talk to your DM about it and be like, hey, can we, like, take a step away from this kind of thing here, a little bit, that helps, too. Because, again, like, we all have our different levels of comfort. Certainly there's things that can be less like, oh, God, no, and there's things that are like, I don't really want to do this,
Yeah. It's just as easy as that. Just talk to your players as well.
Yeah, just talk
try
to
to
them.
In a session 0, say, these are the themes that may come up. Is anyone not comfortable with these themes?
Yeah. It's... And certainly it also depends on how, like, you could just basically like say, hey, this is going on in the background of the world. Does this matter to you? Because this is not something that's going to affect your characters directly, You could say that, too.
Yeah.
Like, there could be a big war between two nations, which is really brutal, and they're like, the one nation's decided to go very weapons of mass destruction, or like, war crimesy.
Fascist.
Yeah, fascist, war crimesy, weapons of mass destruction. On the other, it could be something that could come up in your game, but it's not directly affecting the normal storyline. It's just something that maybe you've established because it can come up, you know. You're like, hey, I'm letting you know this can come up. It's sort of out there, but, you know, don't focus dark theme on
like, I don't think in any game I've been of yours lighting, I don't think you've ever gone any further, like any steps too far. I don't think I've done it either. But I don't run a lot of games with darker themes these days.
Honestly, they can come across when you're not careful.
Yeah.
Like, even if you say something simple, one of your players could do something too. We've had that.
Oh God, we have.
We have, and I've also had things where, like, honestly, like, you know, it's this weird point in time where, like, I honestly don't know, the serial killer flump. That was a little that point in time where I'm like, I don't know what's great
I think
here.
It's a little much, but I think it was kind of a little much because no one else besides me in that game was, you know, evil.
Yeah, I think that's
like, technically speaking, my character, not a great person, has murdered a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, that's why it was sort of like, I'm like, yeah, he got rid of the kid very violently and, you know, murderly.
That was like, I think the mask was a little much, but I think the saying a kid disappeared was fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think the mask ended up being,
I think
like,
the mask was a little much, but it's kind of like it's a little bit like a Buffalo Bill situation where it's like, this is so absurd that it kind of like made it not as terrible.
I can see that. Yeah,
but it was still kind of a little bit.
Yeah, I can see how it was that way. It was certainly one of those things that I was like, you know, kind of there with it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't, you know, this is kind of a weird direction to take it. I think it's kind of like, honestly, I think something like, you know, things like, I think the reason I did it was mainly because, honestly, players were just kind of there, not doing a lot.
I think you really needed something to remind the characters, hey, this is an evil game, guys.
Yeah.
You're playing kind of neutral, play lawful neutral, which is, you know, technically that's fine, but also, you don't really, you're trying to summon Satan.
Yeah. I think it was that general idea that, like, yes, you don't need to be evil per se. Like, you can be lawful neutral, but you still have to reflect on the, you know, what's going on here a little bit, and terrible things will happen.
Look, hey, Asmocon was still the best idea we had, right?
Yeah, Asmocon was really fun, I have to say. Like, it was a fun one. I did enjoy Asmocon quite a lot. It was a hell of a decision. Look, that I was just like,
it was one hell of a choice that came after another really weird choice. The path we decided to go down, man. That game got a little weird.
I can agree. Like, I was like, I had, it was one of those topics that I knew was kind of there, but I hadn't quite, like, fully broached the entire, like, yeah, we got,
Man, yeah. I'll just tell y'all, we made the collective decision to just have this old dude get, like, eaten and possessed by Asmodeus to go, like, have a child with his long-lost relative, which, you know, is a little bit weird.
Yes. Yes.
But, you know, it was an ending, certainly. Then we had a convention where we summoned Satan. And also, the city probably got completely destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a big, like, epic battle because, you know, you're basically...
That wasn't my problem.
Yeah. certainly some things happened. And
sometimes players can make decisions that are really weird and kind of uncomfortable.
very much so. You know, it was that weird thing, especially that entire thing was like, I wasn't really, like, sure what you wanted to do, but I knew it was sort of like, honestly, it was as weird as it's supposed to be. It was sort of be like, you've got to convince a person to basically have a kid, you know?
Yeah.
Which isn't always easy, especially, like, you know, in that situation. So it's sort of like, you know, you went for the more interesting choice of people.
Yeah, like, my logic was in character. My dude is like, yeah, he's an assassin, but he's also kind of like a legal expert in many ways. So I'm like, he would probably go sort of the more legal contracty way, and then it got really weird.
Well, it's sort of like, I gave you two big options. I gave you the option of the, you know, former drug addict that you can fix up, that if you help them out, they're probably willing to do whatever. You could basically surrogate mom them pretty easily, you know, because they'd probably be like, yeah, sure, you know, I'll pick some, like, you know, money and fix me up for being a surrogate mom for, like, you know, something or other. That sounds like fine. Or you went for the rich lady who was in it to get, like, out from under her father's control.
Yeah. Look, I think the drugged up lady got a better ending where I taught her how to murder people.
You did teach her how to be an assassin instead.
Yeah, and she's probably murdered a lot of drug dealers.
Yeah, honestly, got revenge for her, like, you know, drug issues. It was a story. Look,
Man, I was the only player in that game at that point, alright?
Yeah, it was a thing. You know, it was a thing. We just... Oof. That game went on a little longer.
I think a lot of those themes were played on a little more on the comedic side, so it wasn't as weird or like uncomfortable.
I think that's another thing too, is if you play something on a comedic side, it helps.
You can also make something so absurd it's not offensive anymore.
Dark comedy is a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it might not be funny to everybody, but a lot of times they can...
Lightens the tone.
Yeah, like, even if you're like, you know, you're not like, that's not really my humor, you definitely can recognize sometimes when it's like, oh, yeah, okay. You know. Yeah, a bit more silly evil. I think it really was. Shall we discuss our games this week? Because
we had some games.
2 games.
I ended 2 games. Holy shit. Nothing happened on Monday. Tuesday, however. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, I ended my little cyberpunk fantasy game. That was Sunday. Oh, that is Sunday, right.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I think that? Tuesday, Star Wars, God. Mm-hmm. That also ended. But Sunday, I ended that game, I think, in a pretty good way. You guys got back from your really your optional side quest that I kind of put in just to satisfy your curiosity. You got back from that, and then you started investigating. Hey, there's some missing people. So you investigate the area, and then you made a decision to go sneak into the building through the sewers. You did with help from the rats. It was ever so helpful, rats.
I honestly, if one of the other players hadn't suggested that, I wasn't going to.
You know, you got Jimmy the Rat, and then someone murdered Jimmy the Rat.
Someone devoured Jimmy the Rat. Thank you.
No, yeah, fucking lightning murdered Jimmy the Rat. Poor Jimmy had a family. But you broke into the building, and then you fought some actual undead.
Yeah.
Which is something you'd previously not encountered. That was really, really weird and awful. Mm-hmm. And you did some minor investigatings. You did murder a different rat. Jimmy left. That's right. Jimmy did live.
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Yeah. You basically, in a subtle way, found out all those rats may or may not have been awoken by a druid who appeared for about 2 seconds in the campaign. Because he got bored. Druids are stupid. But you went through this building. Found out, hey, it got, like, super attacked, and someone from the inside made it so no distress signals got out.
Mm-hmm.
I think I conveyed that decently enough.
Yeah.
But then you went up to have your final showdown with this mage necromancer you've been chasing, and you fought a cyborg woman who had a big plasma gun on her shoulder and a big sword and the ability to suplex a man through a table.
And that was entertaining.
Yeah, he suplexed. Jay, a good friend Jay, was playing like a 60-year-old man. I've suplexed him through a table and then threw him across the room.
That was...
But the dude had like 80 HP going into that fight because of armor of Agathis.
He's a beefy old man.
He was a beefy old man, and Ari Lightning's character locked down the timer mechanic I had by casting some really good spells. Because what I was doing was, while you were fighting this cyborg, the mage was trying to escape through a portal. You didn't see most of the portal stuff, got black tentacled, but in doing that, she was rolling all of her activation checks at disadvantage, and she needed to make 3 checks. She made it in 6 checks, and the turn the boss died. Yeah, because she was getting hit, and the darkness, she was pretty much unable to do the ritual efficiently. So really good on you.
Yeah.
Then as she tried to escape, you cast sleep. She had 20 HP left. She was going to go down no matter what you rolled.
And that was the interesting thing is, we didn't know that she was trying to escape.
No.
We just threw the stuff on top of her, like the horrible darkness, and it was like, oh, that is the right move. Well,
Yeah. It's a move I actually didn't expect, because I didn't remember Ari had that spell. However, it was a very entertaining move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when she was unconscious, you found out that she turned all the CEOs and, you know, like, big office officials of this company into a big weird flesh portal.
Mm-hmm.
Because she may have wanted to go to a demiplane of necromancy to absorb all of its power. Would that have worked? I don't know. Maybe.
Gross.
Yeah, big flesh portal. You did manage to deactivate it. You did roll you rolled twice her HP, so she was certainly unconscious. And thankfully, you cast it away from the rest of the party, because you would have put Dawn and Jenrick to sleep, because Jenrick had like 2 HP.
I was nearly murdered.
So you would have knocked out Jenrick for one final time. But you managed to shut down the portal after some very panic-induced checks. And I think that was it was a good session. I think it was a good end. I did that boss fight pretty decently.
I think the only thing I have to say about it is, like, I wasn't like the like end our resolution. I felt like I don't think we had like a point to put our characters very resolved.
You didn't really have a great, but you don't always get that in
That's
real
true.
life in games.
You don't always get like a good resolution. You know, it's sort of like
Most of you kept working your job for a little bit, and then you went on to do other stuff.
Yeah. Which is fine.
Yeah. You don't. Yeah. I think that I like running that game more than the other one I ran. But I think that's because it was a much lower level game.
Yeah.
And also the characters had actual cohesion.
Yeah. Cohesion's a good thing to have.
Yeah. And there's nothing happens on Mondays, to my knowledge. The cell's not here.
Yeah.
Tuesday, the Star Wars game ended. You went to the planet, fought Lady.
Mm-hmm.
And then fought Ghost of Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then you did it. You won. As a side note, towards the end of that game, hated running it.
I can see why.
I think it was, as a game, fine. Overall, it's a game I was displeased in. There were certainly things I would do better next time. However, I still think it was probably fun enough.
I think the one thing I have to say about it is, like, it was another issue of, I feel like there was a character that was there that was maybe not as appropriate for the game.
Yeah. A problem I had early on was with two characters basically not ever wanting to do anything. And because of that, everything I presented the party was getting rejected to an extent. The other thing with these two characters is very early on, like I think 3 or 4 sessions in, went full war crime. And at that point, I didn't feel comfortable with that and really know what to do.
In order to make the game work, none of us knew what to do with Yak.
Yeah. Nax and Yak made the game very difficult to run, but Yak eventually became better towards the end.
Yak at least had like an arc that felt like he like got better.
Yeah.
Nax was the same old character he ever was, and it was like one of those characters that we just had to like live with, because I honestly, if I had acted the way my character should have acted with Yak or Nax, I would have not been in the party with him.
Yeah. It got to the point where I can identify where the game where I started getting frustrated, and I think the game started to decline when you went to the Inquisitor Tower after your first fight with Neros. And the ship was exploded, which caused Rav to leave, most of the party to be incredibly frustrated, and me as a DM to be so frustrated because like a huge chunk of work I did was just removed.
And there was no reason to do it.
No. Like, if there was a reason to do it, I would have been more forgiving. Like, if she had made it to the ship to try to escape, sure. She died in the building.
As soon as she was dead,
no one was gonna go into that ship.
Yeah, and as soon as she was dead, boom, just the explosion, just randomly the explosion.
Yeah, because it got to the problem of what I had planned was for you to get a bunch of information from this ship and start tracking Neros, learning how and why she got the mask, and all of that. But because that ship blew up, I had no logical way of ever giving you that information after that.
Yeah.
So it really, that was the moment I can identify where that game went to the shitter.
I unfortunately have to say, it's sort of like, I don't know if I would want to play with that person again.
That's fair, I think.
It was just such a thing that happened.
I'm hesitant to invite them back to a game I run.
And again, like, maybe they have better characters, certainly.
Yeah, because their character in the game Cell runs is pretty good, but I don't know, because of this one character, it's hard for me to trust them.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like, I don't know them enough for me to trust it, you know. I think, like, if it's a, if it really is just a more of a one-off thing, then whatever, that can happen. Yeah. You can have a character that just doesn't work. Or something.
Everyone makes at least one problem character in their D&D career. Everyone does it. I've done it. I've made the problem character before. Not quite to that degree, but I've certainly made a problem character before. Granted, that was like fucking 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. I've learned since then. But, no, that character was just... That I can identify that's the problem with the game, was that character.
Yeah. Yeah. I still feel like it was a fine resolution, but it was sort of like one of those things is like, honestly, that character I felt like didn't really have the same kind of resolution as the rest of us almost.
No. Nothing changed or developed about that character.
Yeah. But, I mean, otherwise, I think it was fine.
The game was fine. It was kind of standard world-ending villainy, which I don't usually like doing, but it got to the point where I was so frustrated that I didn't want to... I didn't want to put any real thought in recrafting an entire story, and I was so frustrated that 20 to 30 hours of work was deleted pretty much in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
I got frustrated, and a frustrated DM is bad for a game.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of a game where I'm not frustrated because I gave up on it long ago.
Oh boy.
Didn't have Buccaneers, but you had Children of Wrath.
Yeah, we had Wrath.
You found, Atlantis, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was chatting with Lightning, and I'm like, damn. Tantus hasn't played Final Fantasy XIV, but this is exactly like the Endwalker area for Final Fantasy XIV.
I just thought, ancient civilization under the ice was just my idea, It was they hid themselves away.
It's a pretty good concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were kind of jerks, but they were also, it's that thing of, they're like, hey, yeah, we were watching, 4,000 years ago when some of your people, unearthed our technology and tried to make stuff with it, and, drove the planet into an ice age and blew up a continent. Yeah. Have you learned better than that guy? Which, honestly, because you have Kaz in your group, you can't say yes to that. Because Kaz would just do the exact same thing as Urza. He just doesn't have an evil brother to join with him. Or, they were both evil, kind of. But, a brother. Well, he does have a brother. His brother went into Artifice also. Whatever. It was a thing. They found, an ancient Thranian outpost which had evolved into a city after, thousands upon thousands of years because they had quite a long time to live there hidden away. And they were like, look, guys, we don't really want to speak with you. We weren't really going to do anything about this, But I guess since you're here, we'll help at least give you information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to deal with us either.
Honestly, you have Urza Jr. in the making, and they don't really want to deal with it. Yeah. It's sort of like, they're like, oh, guys, what assholes? But I'm like, look, these guys have reason to.
I want to be, 100% honest.
Mm-hmm.
Kaz needs to stop mentioning he ripped a hole in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Claude needs to stop fucking telling everyone he's a Phyrexian monster.
Mm-hmm.
Just have some subtlety, guys.
Neither of them have subtlety.
My god. Oh,
this is something that is just Joe. None of his characters are subtle. None of them ever are. It's just an issue with it.
It shows.
I kind of set forth, something that would probably be great to be subtle for Joe. And honestly wasn't thinking about it at the time until much later on. I'm like, oh god, that's right, he's not subtle.
Tells everyone under the sun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's just mention I have a half-dragon inside of me to this dragon. That'll go fine.
Or mention I've resurrected a horrible dragon monster. That's totally... Okay, I think that's what it is. He is proud of his reality bending.
Yeah. Like,
And the
he did a
Phyrexian scientist was like, we had a horrible accident with that in our early days. It was outlawed because of that, because, creating dimensional portals is one thing. Creating pocket dimensions is incredibly unstable and dangerous.
Yep.
Turns out, I've established there's a reason bags of holding aren't around here.
Yep.
Because only
Oh my
one person
God.
was insane enough to invent one.
Oh, he's a psychopath.
He kinda is. There's like, as I said, there's like 2 or 3 sessions left. I'm not gonna let it go any farther than that.
I'm kind of glad. As much as I've enjoyed my time with Wrath, I want, like, to not be involved.
I'm honestly at that point where I'm like, I'm done with the story. I just want to finish the story.
I can tell that you kind of don't want to run it anymore at this, like, the pre-session conversations now. Yeah, it's like, it's rough, man.
If we weren't at the end, but I feel like it's every session, Kaz just draws the soul from me with another horrible thing that I can't argue against it. There's nothing I can do. I'm like, why are you this evil? Why are you this terrible? It's very evil and terrible. Please stop. Just please no.
I will probably have him, like, arrested and honestly murdered post-game.
It's the best. It really is.
Like, I it's never come up, but there was a point where we were going to talk to Claude about, like, the horrible Nazi that's inside of his brain. And I was going to bring up, like, if asked, I was going to be like, do you want my opinion as your friend or as, like, a national leader? And I was going to be like, as a national leader, I would try to have all 3 of you killed as quickly as possible.
Like, and the thing is, like, honestly, one of the things I suggested to Joe might be something he wants to take up. His, not seeing his head wants to get out. Honestly, that might be good to extract him for Joe's safety.
Yeah.
Granted, he has a physical body then, but,
You can kill a physical body.
Yeah, you'd have to kill Claude to get rid of him currently.
Nope.
So sort of like, that's actually probably a really good idea for Claude. Get him out of your head. Quite literally.
It's an actual, like... actually the worst party is those 3. Like, they're just the worst people.
Yeah. No, I noticed that, like, somewhere along the way. I think, like, Claude wants to not be a horrible monster, but he falls back on, like, he is a horrible monster as his default to solve problems, and I think that's the issue. Like, don't use your horrible monster powers. Use your warlock powers. They're 2 different things. One of them is living up to your nature as a monstrosity. Yep. The other is trying to be just a person. When every problem is a nail, you must hit it with the largest board you can. I'll tell you, if he would solve his problems with his giant nowadays, I would be fine with it, because he actually, like, or the half dragon, or one of those, but he always defaults to Phyrexian or Shadow Monster.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have 2 really good options that I established are actually pretty decent beings that you could kind of work with? You don't want to default to them? No. Well, shit. There goes that entire thing that I set up nicely. And then, I guess Carrie's trying or something. I don't know. She's not a great druid. She's trying to be a druid. Whatever.
She's still pretty terrible.
Yeah. She's at least... She's medium terrible. She's like tolerable terrible. She's not war crimesy terrible.
Like, out of everyone in the group, Cole is like, you're whatever. These other 2 might need to die at some point.
It's like, you're very demonic in nature, but at very least, like, try not to live up to it. You just try to...
Yeah.
You're... Go ahead.
If you're like trying, and at most you'll keep all of your problems limited to that shitty continent over there.
Yeah.
These guys are like a world threat.
Yeah, Claude's mind is one step away from breaking and drawing me into like a really horrible monster that he kind of was built to be like a super assassin monster. He was built to be an assassin and like replace people. You know? That was the nature of his being. It's like a horrible assassin monster that devours people and replaces them to assassinate other targets, you know? I eat my way into the place and, we need some information from them, I'll eat them. We don't need information from them, stab them in the neck.
Nah, just half eat someone and leave them there.
It's like, I'm like, you literally digest people. You want to put him inside you.
What did you expect, dude?
I've described, you absorb people when they are in you. There's a reason why you didn't absorb a skeleton man. He's a skeleton. He was already bones, and he was a magical nature different than the things you've absorbed. You know? He has his own magic nature. That's why you didn't eat freaking Maxwell. Which is also weird, trying to be like Maxwell's flesh. That was just... There's been some really terrible plans.
Yeah, I've heard.
But it's almost done. And then I have plans for some other things. They'll be nice.
Thank God.
Yeah. I went through all Starfinder, Pathfinder, and Pathfinder 2nd edition. And it came up a list of adventure paths I would love to run, because I think I could do something neat with all of them.
Down for any of those, depending on the day.
I might move things from Thursday. I have no idea.
Because I know I'm going to start running something on Thursday eventually.
I think I want to, after this season of Buccaneers, I'm going to cut back just to 3 hours, because honestly, I think it's a lot better for all of us.
3 hours is 4 hours is rough sometimes.
It's 1 in the morning for both of us, and that is...
I'm like old now. I'm not the wee youngin' I was.
There have been plenty of times that we are done Buccaneers that I kind of like sit around for like, because normally like if I'm done Wrath, I can sit around for a little while, you know, and maybe then like go to sleep or something, you know, like relax a little bit, you know. That one is I have a couple of times I've just like, you know, ended it and then fallen asleep in my chair.
Oof.
You know, because it's just like I'm just so exhausted for that.
Man, it's rough sometimes, man. Like I think I'm just too old to stay up till like 1 or 2 a.m. anymore. Not even that old.
Yeah, Kara's not trying. She says not being as bad.
That's true.
You know, the heads. Look, there's some stuff I did that was kind of crazy, and I thought would have been neat concepts early on. It wasn't great. Like honestly, it was experimental with like trying something a little different in 5e. It wasn't the worst experiment I've done, like giving like a lot of like weird goop powers to Claude and some like just making Carrie an actual half demon and like you know giving Kaz some like artifice understanding powers, which is a good way of just like you can understand something, you don't have to roll a die. Honestly, I think that's why I gave it to him. Was I'm like, here, don't roll something, just let me know. If you want to figure it out, great, you just do. I don't have to worry about you rolling stuff and not figuring stuff out then. Look.
Yeah.
They don't fight anything, so it doesn't matter.
No, they don't fucking do anything in that game, man. Like, I fucking made a fighter sorcerer. They don't do anything.
If they did something, the unbalanced shit would make a difference.
I don't do shit in that game. I talk to people when I'm needed. Otherwise, I'm just disappointed in everyone.
As am I. God. But that's almost over. Yeah. Did you have anything on Friday?
No. Friday game was canceled because Cell wanted to do his homework instead, which honestly probably a good decision.
Yeah, good idea to make sure and get done homework. All right. I guess that was our week in gaming. It was a week.
That was our week. Yep. We certainly had a week.
We had a week. Couple games ended. Almost ending one game. I'm going to be down to one game. Making plans for those future games. Hopefully, honestly, like, I got to figure out, you know, like, where I'm going from. Because it's sort of like one of those things. It's like, maybe perhaps, Mads and Fish wouldn't be bad in a shorter term game.
Yeah, I think they'd be fine in a short game.
Yeah.
A long game, no.
Yeah. A long game, they just reach this level of...
Shorter games have reigned in chaos.
Yes. Anyway, let's get going. I'm going to go relax and finish my food, which I've been slowly working through.
Yeah, I'm going to chill. I go back to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to figure out in the next couple of weeks about changing schedule. Maybe I'll change schedule next week. We'll see. But so discussing tabletop, expected schedule change. I'll kind of like brace it in the chat, see what people think, maybe. Yeah. So, thank you for joining, everybody. Thank you, as per usual, nowadays.
No problem.
I guess I should be back on Monday. I'm not sure what I'm doing on Monday. I haven't decided if I want to do my 2-part finale of Final Fantasy XII or start with something else for a bit, and maybe because part of me feels like I should, honestly, if I'm going to do the 100 trial levels, maybe I should just off stream level up to 99, because that makes it a lot
that's
easier.
a good idea.
Because the 90 to 100 are where I looked and I'm like, these are hard, these trials. And like that extra 15 levels might make the difference to get those done pretty easily. But that's a task to do. That's why I'm like, I'm going to have to like set that aside to do that.
That's like, you need to grind in your off hours.
I just haven't had the energy to like grind for a little bit, because honestly I think it's some other stuff just ending. But I'll try to maybe get that done when I have some chances to, and figure out some other games to schedule. So I'll figure out the schedule. Expect it up, Monday-ish. More stuff on YouTube. If you haven't checked that out, I would recommend checking it out. So eventually I'll catch up to this
one day.
I am like... Today uploaded an episode from February.
Hey, that's close, right?
This is close. I'm still on Season 2 of Children of Wrath. I think I'll finish up Season of 2 and then move on to catching up a little bit on Buccaneers.
I checked. Giselle and I were curious how long Buccaneers has been ongoing. I think you only have uploaded up to like session 10 on the YouTube.
I think that is correct.
It's been like almost a year now.
I will not argue that is probably correct. Season 1 was 20 episodes. Season 1 and 2 would have been 20 episodes combined. Season 3 was 10 episodes. That's 30. So we're actually only on 34 episodes. Honestly, that's actually not as many as you'd think, but I think we've had some breaks in between seasons.
Yeah. And,
there was a couple missed weeks and stuff there, too. So, I suspect it will definitely hit 50 episodes. Like, the thing is, I was thinking about this season, and honestly, you are, like, a third of the way in. You might hit the end of the season by, like, 12 episodes at most.
That happens.
This is a shorter season just because there's not as much to do, honestly. Yeah. Just isn't. So, there's a little bit of a quicker one. But, we'll see how things go. I'm guessing we'll probably go past the year mark.
Because the game started in September.
Yeah.
Of last year.
Yeah, so we're hitting that mark.
It'll probably be like a year and a quarter before the kind of game, which is pretty standard for Pathfinder adventures because they are quite long.
Yeah.
It took me and my IRL group 2.5 years to do Wrath of the Righteous completion.
I think I've fortunately cut out a lot of the chuff, and I've learned a little bit more while doing this one on what more to cut out from chuff and stuff too. That we can, next time I run one of these, it'll probably be a little quicker, maybe down to a year, maybe less than a year. They still be the 6 seasons, and give that up. I think that's why I chose a lot of the Avengers I chose, because I'm like, I could set up something where characters could switch out of this. I easily came up with a concept in, Rise of the Rune Lords in 3 seconds of how you could have multiple characters. Hey, your characters work together with someone from the town to be the heroes during the first big opening scene and then, oh hey, you guys start like a group that's helped to defend the town or like take care of problems around town, like an adventuring kind of group. You get some extra members. Oh, someone has to step away. Grab another member that you recruited during those other like hours you were off doing other shit. There you go. It took me 5 seconds to come up with that. Honestly, because like you come back to like freaking Sandpoint after every adventure anyway. Oops, all Sandpoint. Anyway, Ling 2.0, the Lingier. All right, I'm done with that one. That was a terrible joke. It didn't make sense. All right, bye, everybody. Farewell. Goodbye. Farewell. I'm going to stop right now.